Hi, I'm Haze Long, an artist and speed painter from Malaysia. Today we are diving deep into the world of portrait painting in Procreate. If you ever wonder how to infuse your painting with breathtaking light and captivating effects, this is the video for you. In this video, I'm sharing my top 10 techniques and tips in how to create a stunning light-infused portrait. So the first tip I have for you guys is called the paint and carve technique. So for this technique, we're going to load a very soft brush in, which is the fat medium brush, and then we're just going to quickly block in some shapes here. Then we will start to carve them out using the eraser tool, but we're going to load a harder brush in it. So I'm going to use the nickel roll brush, and using that I'm going to carve out the shapes. Alternatively, you can also use the smudge tool to push the shapes and modify the shapes as well. So using all three tools to paint, make sure that you have soft edges and hard edges all in one shape. This way you really get to control how in focus each area of the painting is. Just make sure that you are working on a new layer each time you start a new shape, and once you're done, just merge down with the base layer. And if you really want a soft shape, you can erase with a soft brush like the fat medium brush. So this way you can ensure that your shape stays soft. For areas that requires detail, you can use the noisy sketch and smudge brush into the eraser tool and use that to erase shapes and carve out the shapes as you see fit. I also like to use the nickel roll brush to erase if I want a sharper edge, and if I want the softer edge, of course I would go for the fat medium brush. So try this technique out if you are open to exploring noisy textures in your painting. The second technique is called the three-tone technique. First, let's turn your image reference to have zero saturation, so it's going to be black and white. Duplicate this layer like 2 times, and we're going to go to curves and make it into a staircase shape. We are going to adjust this curve staircase handle shape in order to get just the highlights that we want. Now for the other duplicate, we are going to adjust the curve for this image to only have shadows. Now let's create a new layer below these 2 duplicates and drop in a neutral gray tone that we think is representing the majority of the values of this painting. Then we're going to set the first layer that we tweak to be the add blending mode, and the second layer to multiply. So then we will end up with this image. We will save this and use this as our reference to paint. It's called the three-tone technique because it only has highlights, mid-tone, and the shadow. So I've already painted the highlights here, and you can see that some of the shapes are a little bit different compared to the reference, and that's fine because we get to make our own decisions as an artist. And I've also incorporated some textures here. But basically, this technique allows us to work really fast in blocking and shaping the shapes since there are only 3 shapes. Once the shapes are done, the painting is mostly completed. You just have to color it in, and you can see here I have the layers here, and make sure you duplicate another set so that you don't mess up the original version in case you need them again. And to color them, all you need to do is to create a new layer above each value and make it to color blending mode. Then we will just drop any color in to test the color that you want. But what I like to do is to use the hue, saturation, and brightness tool to adjust the color layer to get the colors that I like. You will also notice that if you paint different colors on this layer, you will not mess up the drawing itself, because even though you're changing colors, the blending mode does not change the values that are underneath. This way you get to explore colors safely without messing up what you have already done so far, and you won't disturb your drawing as well. In just a few minutes, I can finish coloring the mid-tone, and as usual, I always try to group all my coloring layers together. You can stack as many as you want, just remember to group them and keep them organized. Now we're going to repeat the same steps, setting up the color blending mode for the layers that we want to color for both the shadow and the highlights, and then go through our coloring process, and we will end up with something like this. Because the values and the colors are separate, it's very easy for us to adjust any of them if we want to adjust something. After that, it's all a matter of filling in the colors and the values that's missing in between. And this is a great foundation to start with because we will make less mistakes this way. The third tip is all about alpha lock. So right here you can see that I have the highlights layer and I just want to change the colors for the highlights. But if I paint over this area, you can see that I'm painting over the entire thing and I am losing the sketch that I already have. So to avoid that from happening, I can just turn on alpha lock for this layer, and now when I paint on this layer itself, I'm only affecting the areas that I have painted before. This is why you should always separate everything into layers so that you can edit the details anytime you like, and this way you can retain all the changes and all the progress that you have done so far. Mask is a great way to introduce edits to a layer when you are unsure. So here I have some highlights and I want to erase some of it to become more translucent and transparent. But if I do that and I want to turn back or undo, it will be difficult. So I use mask. So I turn on mask for this layer. Immediately a white layer mask show up. So white means that the layer is showing, and now if I invert it, it becomes black, right? And black means that the layer is not gonna show. So now if we use the eraser tool on this layer mask, we are actually gonna erase the layer away, but the layer is still there. We are just affecting the mask. And now if we switch to the brush and we have white loaded in, we'll be painting the layer back again. So this is like a layer that can control the transparency and visibility of the layer it's attached to. For now, I actually just want this patch of highlight to be less apparent, so I'm using the eraser tool to erase it lightly so that it's less opaque. Here I have this big patch of white here, and I'm gonna create a mask so that I can start shaping it to look like the foliage shadows that's in the reference here. Notice that white is loaded in my color picker, so it means that when I paint, the big patch of white is showing under the brush strokes. And the good thing about using mask is that you can use the smudge tool to smudge the transparency as well. So you can see here that the visibility of this big patch is controlled by the layer mask that is all black and white. Now look at this trick. I am going to duplicate this layer, clear the layer mask, and then invert it again. So now it's hidden. I'm going to load the fat hidden brush into my brush tool and paint a soft shade. So now look, I have a glow here that is made of the same layer, just with a different layer mask. This way I'm just recycling the work that I did before and I'm saving time. And now take a look at this scenario. In the reference, we can see that there's translucent clothing with skin tone showing under. So let's try to paint that here. I'm going to quickly lay in some skin tone colors here first. And then turning on the layer, I am going to turn on mask. And let's invert it to hide it for now. So now if I paint with white, you can see that I am making the gradient show. This is a square painted with white. And now I'm picking gray and painting on the layer mask. You see that it is still showing, but it is showing less. And if I pick a darker gray, you can see that it's showing even less. And if I paint with black, you guessed it, it's gonna disappear. So we're gonna use this to our advantage and paint shades of gray to show that some of the skin is showing through the fabric. It's really important to understand how values control the transparency in the layer mask. You see, when I paint this layer, I'm using a lot of smudging. And by smudging white on black, I'm creating a myriad of grays in between without even having to paint any grays. So I'm actually using a shortcut here, and I hope that you can see that when I'm using this process. For the next scenario, take a look at the highlights that I've painted here. I think they are too bright, so I need to tone them down, and I can use mask to help me with that. See, I'm picking gray here, and you see that when I paint over this area becomes significantly less opaque. So we can use this to adjust the transparency of the highlights, and you can see here I have a light gray painted and this area is significantly more subtle. So the next tip is about clipping mask, and see here I have a layer in screen blending mode, which is some highlights that I've painted in just one color. So we're going to create another layer and set it to clipping mask. So what this does is, if I paint anything here, it will just appear in wherever the green highlights were painted before. And not only that, it will actually follow the blending mode that the main layer is set to. So it was set to screen, right? So whatever I paint here will also be on screen blending mode. So because I usually paint the shapes first and then worry about the colors and the values later, so this is a good way to use clipping mask to just change things after you have painted the shape. Now see what happens if I change this blending mode to color. When it's set to color, this is actually affecting the color of the main layer now. So you can use this to cleverly assign blending modes or to just follow the blending mode of the parent layer. So now I'm just going to recolor this main layer using this clipping mask here that is set to color blending mode. So it's a thing, I like to have darker upper lips in my painting, and I like to do this at the end of the painting. So I'm introducing the next tip, which is gradient maps. So when I'm ready to do it, I'm going to duplicate this layer and I'm going to head to the gradient map tool. So I'm picking a red gradient because that's the color of the lips, and this gradient is mapped from dark to light with all the gray tones in between. So the dark to light goes from left to right. So you see what I'm doing now, I'm pushing all the dark tones towards the right, which means I'm making all the mid-tones darker. Then I'm using the pencil option to repaint just the upper lip so that this effect only applies to the upper lip. I can also use the smudge tool to feather out the edges a little bit for a blended effect. Once I'm done painting the area of influence, I can still adjust the gradient to adjust how dark or change the color even for this gradient map. I can spend my time to slowly adjust the gradient and the values assigned to whatever values that I already have in my painting. So this is a good quick way to allocate colors to your values that you already have in your painting. The next tip is about picking colors. So the first thing that I would usually do is I would pick a color that I think should be the color that I'm painting. Then I would paint it and see if this is the color that I want. So to make it more vibrant, I'm just going to push the point to the right. This would make it more vibrant. And then I would assess again and see if I need to change the color. Okay, I realized I need to make it colder. So what I did is I pushed the slider to the left. That will make it colder, and then when I paint it, I can see that it's too vibrant, so I push it to the left, and that would get me a more neutral and grey tone. I also need it darker, so I'm pushing it downwards, and now I have it in the color that I want and the value and the chroma that I want, so I can begin painting with it. Here's the second example. I'm picking colors and seeing what color I want first. So I want blue, but I need it a little bit darker. So to get it darker, I'm pushing the point downwards a little bit and I'm testing it again. And if I get the color that I want, I will just continue painting with it. Now the thing is, color is relative, so what may work in that point doesn't work in another area. So like it does not work here and we have to modify it. Now I'm pushing the point up to get it to be brighter, but it's too bright, so I'm pushing it down again. And I'm changing the color to be more purple. And now I'm trying to make it more grey by pushing it to the left. After testing out, I'm settling down with this tone. One last example before I reveal the theory. So if I pick this red here from the nose and I paint it lower, you can see that it's clearly darker here, even though it appears to be the same value in the nose. That's because color is relative. So I'm just going to push it up to try and get it a bit brighter, but this is too much. So let's push it down a little bit. Okay, so now I'm just trying to match the grayness first, which is the chroma. So I'm pushing it to the left. It's still too bright, so let's drag it down diagonally towards the black. And now I'm almost there already. You can see that it's disappearing. It's the same value as what's around it now, but it's just different color. And this is exactly what I want. And now this same swatch, I paint it under her lips and it looks completely cold here. Like it's just a totally different color. So let's try and adjust this to make it even colder to match back the relationship that we have with the chin. Pushing it to the orange seems to fix the problem and it kind of seems to match the temperature already. We just have to make it more vibrant and a little bit brighter so that we can match the value that is in this area. So there's a lot of color picking that we do in order to match values, but we're just changing the chroma and the colors like what we are doing right now. So only you as an artist would know what swatch you're looking for, the exact tone, value and chroma. Like when I'm explaining all this, you actually have no idea what swatch I'm looking for, right? Only I would know that. So all I can do is to teach you how to pick those colors. Okay, so this is the color picker that is in square that we usually use, and this is the slider here. So if we move towards the right, it's actually getting warmer, but actually heading towards anywhere that has red is gonna get warmer. So it depends on how the slider is positioned. So in this case, I think that going left, it's gonna get colder. So it depends usually what color you're choosing. So the slider is where you decide your temperature and your color, but your swatch picker is where you decide your value and your chroma. So if you go diagonally upwards, you're actually getting brighter towards the white, right? And if you go diagonally down towards the left, you are actually getting darker. And of course, if you want more gray, you are going to go left. And if you want things to get more vibrant, you're definitely going to head to the right side. So if you go bottom right, you are getting darker but also more vibrant at the same time. And of course, if you go top right, that is the most vibrant that you can go, but not necessarily the most bright. You have to be used to color picking all the time when you are refining your painting, because you see, color is relative. In this same swatch, in 3 different locations, they look completely different. And sometimes they look darker, sometimes they look more gray, more vibrant, because colors are relative and they look different because of what's surrounding them. And that's why it's very important for you to use the 3-tone technique when you paint, because you get to paint the values first, and then you get to explore and experiment with all the colors first. Then only you get to repainting, and that's where your crazy color picking journey begins. If you start from the scratch and start picking colors and painting everything from scratch, you have a lot of work to do, because you're trying to figure out the drawing, the proportions, the color, the values, and the chroma all at the same time. So many mistakes can happen. But if you leave all these tasks to the end when you're repainting the painting, this actually makes it easier for you, because you're trying to pick a color based on the value that's already there. So you're matching the values that's already on the screen. You just have to decide on the chroma and the color. The next tip is about intuitive color using. So we all know that this technique revolves around focusing on the values first, and then using layers that are in the color blending mode to add colors. So this gives us room to experiment with colors that won't mess around with the values that we already have or the drawings that we already have. So we have the freedom to use any colors that we like and to roll back if anything goes wrong. Now, other than that setup, we can also use the overlay blending mode, and this blending mode also allows us to test with colors, but when we apply the color, it appears to be a brightening effect. So we should use this sparingly and only when we want the effect to appear this way. But mainly the workflow really relies on having multiple different layers of different effects and blending modes, giving transparent glazes of different colors to get the result that we want. So we get the freedom to play with colors all we want as well. The next tip has a lot to do with focus. So focus is all about deciding what to focus on for each pass. So for example, there is shadows, mid-tone, and highlights, and we cannot actually focus on every single aspect for every single value. So for this painting, I'm actually focusing on contrast for the shadows, because in the shadows lies all the details. Therefore, contrast is very important for the shadow layer. Meanwhile, for the mid-tones, colors are most important. These are the values that we can keep trying out different colors and be really creative with all the colors that we paint. And lastly, for the highlights, we have to focus on texture, because highlights are usually bright. We can't usually put a lot of colors in it. If there's a lot of colors, then the whole thing will be full of color. So in the highlight section, we are just focusing more on texture, and these textures are also important because in areas of highlights, textures are usually more apparent because light is hitting those spots, and because of that, we can tell what subject matter it is. So for example, the highlights on the hair would have textures of the hair strands, and the highlights on foliage would have the veins of leaves and petals and things like that. So texture is really important in the highlight section. Picking our battles to fight for the entire painting, and also to avoid the whole painting from becoming a cacophony of details and colors and over contrast.
The last tip is all about blending modes. So the first blending mode that we're talking about is screen, and usually I would like to just put one color first. I don't try and paint different colors or different values, just one color for this. And then after the painting is done, we will adjust the colors using hue, saturation and brightness. So it is during this action that I decide on the color that I want for the highlights. After that, I will do some light editing, like erasing or smudging away or blending away certain areas or patches that are too intense. So every single layer with blending modes usually have just like one color, then I would stack many of them, and I don't usually create complex painting within layers that have blending modes because it's difficult to control and to edit after that. So this is another example of using the screen blending mode to highlight her face, because I think that the midtones are a bit too dark, so this step is necessary. And I'm using just the same steps. I'm putting in one color first and then just adjusting the color after that with hue, saturation and brightness. And I can do what I did before in clipping mask. I can create another layer and set it to color blending mode and tie it to that blue layer with clipping mask, and then I can now paint any color to recolor this highlight section here. The next blending mode that I want to share is of course the overlay blending mode. So this is the blending mode that I use to change colors, and this also gives an intensity whenever I paint a different color. It's almost like a burning effect. So this can be quite intense and it has to be used sparingly. You generally want to use this if you want people to notice that you're changing color in those areas. And the next blending mode that we are covering today is the color dodge blending mode. So color dodge is a bit more intense compared to screen. Screen is a lot more subtle. Color dodge really brightens the area up, but then it also retains a lot of the color. When you're using blending modes, colors behave differently and they appear differently as well, so you have to give it a few tries before you can get anything correct. And the last blending mode that I would like to share is the multiply blending mode. So I'd like to use this blending mode whenever I do not want to paint black or grays and I want like colorful shadows. So this can actually give vibrancy and some dimension to the shadows if they're too dead.
Okay everyone, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time in the next video. Leave a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!